Imagine standing in front of the most sophisticated cultures, philosophers of the ancient world, and you're telling them that the ultimate goal of the afterlife wasn't to free your soul from your physical body. It was actually to get your physical body back.
Right. Which, in first century Greece, I mean, that wasn't just considered a foolish idea. It was deeply offensive.
Yeah, totally offensive. The very thought of a corpse waking up was just repulsive to the intellectual elite. Yet that is exactly the claim that turned the Roman Empire upside down.
It really did.
But before we dive into exactly how that happened, I want to offer a sincere divine blessing for your day and for the entire week ahead. May you find true peace, spiritual clarity, and a profound sense of purpose in whatever is in front of you today.
I love that. That's a great way to start.
Thanks. So today's mission is a big one. We are doing a deep dive into one of the most tightly argued and honestly explosive texts in all of ancient literature, 1 Corinthians chapter 15.
And we're drawing exclusively from the theological notes of the Holman and NAA study Bibles for this.
It's exactly. The goal for you, the listener, is to unpack the Apostle Paul's ultimate, definitive argument for the resurrection. We're not just looking at this as some past historical event, but as the vital engine that drives, well, all present Christian hope and future reality.
And to really grasp the sheer shock value of what Paul is writing to the Corinthian church here, we have to look at the cultural water they were swimming in,
Right.
Because in the Greco-Roman world, which was super heavily influenced by Platonic dualism, the physical body was essentially viewed as a tomb.
Like a literal prison for the soul.
Exactly. It was heavy, it was corrupt, and obviously subject to disease and decay. So the educated consensus was that the absolute highest good a human could achieve in death was the liberation of the soul.
Just let the spirit float free.
Right, the spirit floats free and the embarrassing, needy flesh is just discarded forever.
So if you think about it, the Corinthian church is trying to straddle two completely incompatible worldviews. I mean, they're trying to merge Christian spirituality with Greek philosophy.
Which doesn't work.
It doesn't. They want to keep the moral teachings of Jesus. They want the spiritual salvation, but they are drawing a hard line at bodies actually coming back out of graves. They viewed themselves as way too sophisticated for a physical resurrection.
And Paul recognizes this as a fatal error. I mean, they are essentially attempting to play a game of theological Jenga.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, the Corinthians think they can just tap out the block labeled physical bodily resurrection, slide it out of the tower, and somehow keep the rest of their faith standing perfectly upright.
But it doesn't work that way.
No, it doesn't. Paul's entire argument in this text is designed to show them that without that specific physical block, the entire structure of Christianity completely collapses.
It all falls down.
Yes. But, he doesn't start with lofty abstract theology to prove this. He anchors his argument in cold, hard historical reality.
Right, he starts by listing eyewitnesses. He mentions Cephas, Peter, then the 12, and then he drops this massive historical anchor. He states that the resurrected Christ appeared to over 500 brothers at once.
At one single time.
Yeah. And what really stands out in the study notes here is Paul's explicit statement that the majority of these 500 people are still alive at the time he is writing the letter.
Which is huge.
It is an incredibly audacious move for a public document meant to be read aloud to skeptics. I mean, he's essentially providing a directory of living witnesses. He's basically inviting the skeptics to book a boat, travel down to Jerusalem, and cross-examine these people themselves.
It's the ultimate verifiability claim in antiquity, really. Because in ancient jurisprudence, the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses was required to establish a fact.
And Paul provides 500.
Exactly, 500. Plus, he then mentions James, all the apostles, and finally, he points to his own experience. He says the resurrected Christ appeared to him last of all, describing himself as one born out of due time.
Right, or as the literal Greek and the study notes translate it, like an abortion, which is just,
intense.
it is violent, jarring imagery for a writer to apply to himself. Why on earth does he frame his own apostleship as a trauma?
Well, the notes emphasize that his arrival as a witness was entirely unnatural and unexpected. I mean, he was not a disciple who had casually walked with Jesus and naturally transitioned into a leadership role.
Right, he was actively hunting them down.
Exactly. He was an aggressive, violent persecutor of the early church, so his conversion was forced, sudden, and deeply disruptive to his entire life, just like an untimely birth.
Wow.
Yeah, he's basically weaponizing his own hostile background to say, look, I had every intellectual and political reason to deny this event, but the physical reality of the risen Christ forced a complete rewrite of my existence.
That makes a lot of sense.
Hmm.
And once he establishes that the event is historically verifiable, he forces the Corinthians to look at the terrifying consequences of their skepticism.
He really holds their feet to the fire.
He does. He walks them through this devastating logical progression. He basically says, if the concept of a bodily resurrection is impossible, then Christ himself didn't rise. And if Christ didn't rise, the preaching of the apostles is an empty fraud, and the Corinthians' faith is a total delusion.
The dominoes just fall so rapidly here. He points out that if the resurrection is a myth, they are still trapped in their sins.
Because the payment didn't work.
Right. The logic here is that if death held Christ, then the sacrifice was insufficient to conquer the penalty of sin. Furthermore, all their loved ones who have already passed away believing in this message, they are permanently lost. There's no spiritual survival. They have simply ceased to exist.
Which brings Paul to that crushing conclusion. If our hope in Christ is only for this earthly life, Christians are the most miserable of all people.
The most miserable.
He makes it a really harsh binary. I mean, Christianity is not being offered here as a comforting moral framework or like a helpful philosophy for community building.
No, not at all.
It is either the absolute truth that alters the fabric of reality, or it is a tragic, pitiful lie that causes people to suffer for absolutely nothing.
But Paul doesn't leave them in that nihilistic void.
Thankfully.
Right. He immediately pivots. He declares, but as it is, Christ has been raised from the dead. The Jenga tower stands.
The block is secure.
Exactly. And having secured that historical reality, he completely shifts his focus to the mechanical implications. Like, how does the resurrection of one man in the past alter the future of humanity? And to explain this, he introduces the concept of Christ as the first fruits of those who have fallen asleep.
The Greek word there is aparsh, right, which the notes identify as an Old Testament agricultural term.
Yes, aparche. In the Levitical law, the Israelites were required to bring the very first sheaf of the spring harvest to the priest.
Just the first one.
Right. This aparche was presented to God before the rest of the field was harvested. Now, you have to remember, in an ancient agrarian society, the period right before the harvest was a time of immense anxiety.
Sure, because food supplies from the previous year are running dangerously low.
Exactly. So bringing that first sheaf wasn't just a quaint religious ritual. It was a physical, cast-iron guarantee that the famine was over and the full harvest was mature and ready to be brought in.
That's a great image. To put that in modern terms, I guess it's like a technology company announcing a revolutionary, impossibly complex new device.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, so there are rumors, there are skeptics, people say the physics don't work, it's impossible. But then the company debuts a fully functional, flawless prototype.
Right.
And when you hold that working prototype in your hands, the debate is just over. You know the engineering is sound, the factory is operational, and the mass production version is inevitably rolling off the assembly line next. Christ is the prototype, proving the factory of resurrection is real.
That is exactly it. The prototype changes your entire expectation of the future. And Paul deepens this by outlining a framework of representative headship. He draws a parallel between the first Adam and the last Adam, who is Christ.
The tale of two Adams.
Exactly. The first Adam represented all of humanity, and his disobedience brought death into the human genome, so to speak. It was a universal infection.
Right.
But in contrast, the last Adam acts as a new representative head. He introduces a resurrection of life to those who are united with him. One man initiated the inescapable reign of death, and one man initiates the reign of eternal life.
And Paul backs up this massive cosmic theology with the raw reality of his own life. I mean, he argues that his daily choices make zero sense if the grave is the end.
They really don't.
He references fighting beasts in Ephesus, which the notes say refers to the intense, life-threatening human opposition and riots he faced for preaching this message.
Right, not literal animals in a coliseum.
Exactly, fierce human opponents. And he adopts a fatalistic proverb to make his point. Let us eat and drink, for tomorrow we die. Basically, if there is no future reality, the most logical human response is pure, unadulterated hedonism.
Just maximize pleasure.
Maximize pleasure, minimize pain, because nothing matters anyway. But I've got a major sticking point with his argument in this section, actually.
Let's hear it.
Because right in the middle of this soaring logic, Paul drops what feels like a theological live grenade.
Verse 29.
Yes. Verse 29, he asks, what will they do who are baptized for the dead? If the dead do not rise at all, why are they then baptized for them? I mean, if I'm reading this critically, it sounds like he is casually validating a deeply unorthodox proxy ritual where living people are baptized on behalf of corpses.
It does sound like that.
Help me out here. Is Paul actually endorsing occultic practice?
It certainly looks that way on the surface, which is exactly why that verse has troubled readers for centuries. But the study notes highlight a crucial detail about ancient rhetoric and the specific context of Corinth here.
Okay.
Because nowhere else in Scripture is proxy baptism commanded, modeled, or viewed favorably. What Paul is doing here is implying a classic cross-examination technique. He is taking the Corinthians' own flawed, inconsistent behavior and using it as a weapon against them.
Ah, so he is exposing a logical contradiction in their daily lives.
Yes, exactly. Corinth was this crazy melting pot of strange theological ideas, and a specific faction in that church was apparently engaging in this proxy baptism. But notice Paul says, what will they do? Deliberately distancing himself from the practice.
Oh, so he doesn't say we.
Right. He doesn't pause his entire argument about the resurrection to correct their bad theology on baptism. Instead, he leverages their bad theology to destroy their skepticism about the afterlife.
That's fascinating.
He's essentially asking them, you claim to be sophisticated thinkers who know the dead don't rise, yet some of you are dunking yourselves in water on behalf of dead people. Why on earth would you perform a proxy ritual for someone who has simply ceased to exist?
It's brilliant debate strategy. You don't have to agree with your opponent's premise to use their own actions to prove they don't even believe their own premise. That makes much more sense than assuming Paul is suddenly introducing a bizarre new doctrine mid-argument. But, if you successfully prove to a cynical Corinthian that the dead are going to rise, their immediate sarcastic reaction is going to be, okay, what is that going to look like? Are we talking about a reanimated zombie?
Right. What kind of body do they even have? And Paul totally anticipates that exact skepticism. He meets it with this beautiful agricultural metaphor regarding the nature of a seed.
The seed metaphor.
Right. A seed must be buried in the dirt. It must undergo a form of death and dissolution, basically, before it can spring to life as a plant. The core of his argument here is that there is massive discontinuity in appearance, but absolute continuity in identity.
Can you break that down a bit more?
Sure, think about it. The bare grain of wheat you drop into the soil is the exact same organism as the golden stalk of wheat that eventually grows out of it. It's the same identity, but its form has been radically upgraded for a new stage of existence.
I think about this like biology, like a caterpillar and a butterfly.
Oh, that's a perfect modern analogy.
Yeah, because a caterpillar and a butterfly share the exact same DNA, right? It's the exact same identity. But the butterfly is entirely upgraded for a completely new dimension of existence. The caterpillar crawls in the dirt, but the butterfly is built for the sky. It's a perfect way to visualize the natural versus spiritual body.
That aligns perfectly with the linguistic distinctions Paul makes, which the study notes detail beautifully in this section. Paul contrasts the current earthly body with the future resurrected body.
Well,
He says the earthly body is sown in corruption, meaning it is fundamentally subject to the laws of entropy, decay, and disease. It is sown in dishonor and weakness. But the resurrected body, that is raised in incorruption.
it's immune to decay.
Exactly, it's immune to decay, and it is raised in glory and power.
Now, the Greek terms used here seem to point to a change in the actual power source of the body, right?
They do. Paul states that our current natural body is animated by the psyche, and in ancient thought, the psyche is just the biological life force, the living soul inherited from the first Adam who was formed from the dust.
Right, so it's a perishable power source.
Yes, but the resurrected spiritual body is animated by the pneuma, the life-giving spirit of the last Adam from heaven.
That's such an important distinction, because when people hear spiritual body, they often just think of a ghost floating on a cloud.
A hologram or something.
Yeah. But Paul isn't saying the new body is made of immaterial vapor. He is saying it is a highly advanced physical body that is fully animated and sustained by the pneuma, the eternal spirit, rather than just fragile biological processes that eventually fail.
Right.
Flesh and blood, in their current carbon-based perishable state, simply cannot survive in an imperishable dimension. I mean, the hardware must be upgraded to handle the power of eternity.
The transition is an absolute physical necessity, which brings Paul to the revelation of a profound mystery in the text.
And what does he mean by mystery here?
Well, in biblical literature, a mystery isn't a puzzle you solve with clues. It is a divine reality that was previously hidden, but is now suddenly disclosed. And Paul reveals the mechanics of this final transformation. He says not everyone will sleep, meaning not all believers will experience physical death before this event occurs, but all believers will be transformed.
And the speed of this transformation is just staggering.
It really is. Paul uses the phrase, in the twinkling of an eye.
Right.
The Greek word translated there is atomos, which is literally where we get the English word atom.
Wow, really?
Yeah, it literally means something that is uncuttable, indivisible. He is talking about the smallest indivisible fraction of time. In a microsecond, at the sounding of the last trumpet, the dead will be raised with incorruptible hardware, and the living will be instantly, fundamentally transformed.
It is an instantaneous rewriting of physics. And the moment that happens, it's fascinating because Paul's tone shifts completely.
Oh, absolutely.
Throughout the entire chapter, he has been this strict, logical prosecutor, right? He's citing evidence, building deductive chains, cross-examining his opponents, but suddenly he just breaks out into a triumphant, poetic taunt. He says, "O death, where is thy sting?"
It's beautiful.
It is. The ultimate enemy that has terrorized human consciousness since the beginning of time is suddenly rendered completely powerless.
And the study notes outline the profound theological chain behind that specific taunt. Paul writes that the sting of death is sin, and the power of sin is the law.
Okay, I want to push on that mechanism for a second. Why does the law give power to sin? Because on the surface, that sounds completely backward to me. Shouldn't the law be the thing that stops sin?
You would definitely think so. But Paul is operating with a very deep understanding of legal frameworks here. A law actually takes a vague, subjective moral failing and turns it into a quantifiable, actionable debt.
Okay, I'm following.
Think of it like a contract. You cannot be sued for breaking a contract that doesn't exist. The law establishes the boundaries of the contract with God. So when humanity breaks it, sin is no longer just a bad habit. It is a legal violation that demands a penalty. The law exposes the failure and gives sin the right to demand death as the payment.
So the law essentially arms sin with a lethal weapon.
Precisely. But Paul concludes that victory is given through Jesus Christ. By fully absorbing the penalty for the broken contract and then defeating death through the resurrection, Christ legally disarms sin.
The debt is paid.
The debt is paid, the contract is satisfied, therefore death loses its sting. It is no longer a terrifying legal judgment.
Right.
For the believer, it is merely a transition into incorruptibility. Death is entirely swallowed up in victory.
Man, it is breathtaking, cosmic theology. But what I really love about Paul is that he never leaves his readers just staring up at the clouds.
No, he grounds it.
He really does. He lands this massive theological jumbo jet right in the middle of the mundane Tuesday morning. He concludes the entire argument in verse 58 with a therefore.
Yeah.
He says, "Therefore, my beloved brethren, be steadfast, immovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord, knowing that your labor is not in vain in the Lord."
That, therefore, is the hinge upon which the entire chapter swings. I mean, it connects the instantaneous atomic transformation of the human body directly to the tedious everyday actions of human life.
The study notes draw a sharp contrast here with the book of Ecclesiastes, which I think is vital for us to understand.
Oh, definitely.
In Ecclesiastes, the writer observes life purely under the sun, meaning life constrained entirely to this mortal entropic existence. And his conclusion is that it is all vanity. You work yourself to the bone, you accumulate wealth, you acquire wisdom, and then you die. Your body rots, someone else takes your money, and eventually the universe forgets you ever existed.
It is deeply, deeply meaningless.
Right. But the reality of the physical resurrection completely rewrites the mathematics of human existence. Because the resurrection is a historical fact and a future guarantee, human labor done in the Lord is never subjected to the vanity of Ecclesiastes.
Yeah.
The energy you expend out of love, the quiet faithfulness in unseen tasks, the service you render to others, none of it is swallowed by the grave.
It's like the ultimate conservation of energy. I mean, in a closed universe, heat dissipates and things just break down. But in a universe where the resurrection is true, your present actions carry eternal weight.
Yes.
Taking care of a sick child at 3 a.m., operating with relentless integrity in a cutthroat office environment, choosing to love a neighbor who is deeply inconvenient, it is not wasted energy. It is an active investment in an imperishable kingdom.
It provides profound dignity to the most ordinary, exhausting moments of life. Because you know the prototype has secured the future, you can afford to be steadfast and movable, regardless of how difficult or unrewarding the present circumstances might appear.
It really brings us all the way back to the Jenga tower.
It does.
This bodily resurrection is not an optional accessory to the Christian faith. It is the absolute bedrock foundation on which every single meaningful action in your life is built. If you pull it out, everything collapses into meaninglessness. But because it stands securely, everything you do today actually matters forever.
Wow. I want to leave you, our listener, with a final provocative thought to mull over today as you go about those ordinary tasks. If the resurrection guarantees that nothing done in the Lord is ever truly lost or wasted, how might that redefine your definition of success? When you face a project, a relationship, or a phase of life that feels completely stagnant or even like a massive failure right now, consider the seed. The seed has to look like it is dying in the dark dirt before it can become the harvest. Maybe what feels like a total failure today is actually the necessary hidden planting for an incorruptible future. Thank you for exploring this incredible text with us on this deep dive today. As you step back into your life, your work, and your relationships, God blesses all of you. May you go with the unshakable confidence that your labor is never in vain.